afternoon, and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. There is one gift you can give this season that lasts forever. It's the gift of reading. Today we're going to review a number of books for readers of all ages and abilities, and at the end of the program I'll tell you how you can get the complete book list. Of course, there's no better source for books than a librarian, so this afternoon I'm joined by two of the many Vermont librarians who enjoy working with people to find just the right book. It's a pleasure to welcome longtime contributor to Across the Fence, Amy Howlett. Amy is the director of the Springfield Town Library, and with Amy is Joy Warland. Joy is the director of the Jocelyn Memorial Library in Waitsfield. Thanks to both of you for coming in.
Thank you.
So where are we going to start today?
I think we'll start with the youngest. What do you think, Joy? So we know, librarians, and you also, Judy, that every child needs books that they own.
Right.
Every family should have lots of children's books. So I'm going to recommend a true classic, Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus by Mo Willems. I love this book. It is so much fun to read. So I can tell you the plot quite quickly. The bus driver leaves and he says to you, the reader, whatever you do, don't let the pigeon drive the bus. And the rest of the book is the pigeon saying, come on, I've driven the bus before. I'll give you $5 if I can drive the bus. Please let me drive the bus. And then exploding. Oh my gosh, the way you do when you don't get your way.
Right,
yep,
this is great.
and here it is. You've got to let me drive the bus. So it ends very calmly. And the driver comes back and he gets in the bus, and the end pages are a truck. And you know the pigeon has his sights on something else. So friendly, easy. Children's librarians tell me this is a great starter book for kids. You can see the pigeon craning his head around the page, and then on the next page you see the rest of his body. Great book to say, I wonder what will happen next. And children, because there isn't much text and it's cartoony, children will start to read this book to you.
Oh, nice.
While they're laughing.
Terrific. And how about for you, Joy?
Okay, for me, my very favorite picture book, I think probably ever, is David McPhail, Mole Music. Mole Music is about a mole who basically creates world peace by playing the violin. So through music, he uses music as a tool to save the world, basically. So he's a little bit depressed at the beginning of the story. He's a mole, so of course he lives underground, and he works digging holes and digging holes. He sees a man playing the violin on TV and gets very excited and decides he wants to learn to play it. So he orders up a violin and he starts to play it. At first he's not very good at it because it's hard to play the violin. And then he keeps practicing, he gets better and better. So that's a nice little message about, starting something that's difficult at first and getting better at it if you work at it. And he gets better and better, but of course, again, he lives underground being a mole as he is. So he doesn't realize that anyone can hear what he's doing. So he thinks, this is great, I'm learning, but no one will ever hear me play. And so the pictures are all double. So there's the mole underground doing his thing, and up above you see what's happening in the world. So as it progresses, more and more things happen till at the very end there are two battling armies. Spoiler alert, they're coming to each other, and underneath he is playing his violin. And a very clever thing that's in this book is I don't know if this will work, but this is the warring armies after they get along better. So then many of the pages have these little pieces of music up there, and they really are real pieces of music. So the last one is the Ode to Joy, actually the very last one is the Brahms Lullaby after he finishes playing and he goes to bed. And throughout there's other snippets of Beethoven and Brahms if you are aware of that kind of thing, which is kind of a fun thing to do. So it's a beautiful book about working hard at something and using art to change the world, and I love it.
You do love it. So this is The Wild Robot by Peter Brown. I've got to say, I love any book that has robot in the title. This is ages 8 and up, small chapter book. It's part of Dorothy's list, that list chosen by Vermont librarians, parents, teachers, booksellers. Most independent bookstores will have this book. We've made sure that everything on this list is in print and available. You might have to order it depending on where you get your books. But The Wild Robot there's a crate of robots that washes ashore on a desert island. Only one of them survives because robots don't interact well with seawater. An otter pushes the button. Roz, the robot, comes to life. And she is a robot who learns by doing. She is, artificial intelligence. So it's this wonderful story about how she gets to know the animals and to help them survive the cold winter that's coming. It's a little bit of an ecological message. Charming tale for your grade school kids that you love.
Great. And what's next, Joy?
So I have another picture book, but I think of this one, maybe even more than Mole Music, as a picture book for all ages, because it's basically about finding connection and being lonely if you haven't found connection. There again is a somewhat musical theme, just coincidentally, to my taste in books, but a little girl starts out, she's very lonely, and this book only has one word in it at all, which is la. So she starts saying la and trying to get some reaction somewhere in the world. And over and over again, nobody seems to be listening to her or answering back to her, reflecting her experiences. So the little girl drawings are amazing. She goes through every single emotion you could possibly imagine just through her facial expressions and her body language. And the colors are beautiful. And again, you know, spoiler alert, she does eventually find connection when I think it's the moon, it's a little bit vague, but the answers are back in the sky. Yes. And so a really cool thing about this is that because it really does only have one word or the one word repeated, a child can read this all alone just because there's a lot of, you know, narrative told just with pictures, or it's a great thing to do with a child. But the thing that I think is ageless about it is that it could be read by an adult as a metaphor too. Right. You know, like you're looking for connection, you're reaching out, and how great it feels. I mean, you know, the colors just explode when finally she does make that connection. And it's visually just a very beautiful book.
Nice. Okay, Amy, what's next?
So, The Way Things Work by David McCullough. Oh, I'm wrong. The Way Things Work Now. The Way Things Work is the old one. This is the new one. David McCullough lives in Norwich. I think he's got to be a secret engineer. So I'm from Springfield. Shout out to the library. And we are a town of innovation, invention, and ingenuity. This is a book for people who love engineering, who love machines of all kinds. So we start with the simple machines, the inclined plane, the lever, the pulley, and we go on to Blu-ray DVDs. How do they work? What is the mechanism? Or a cell phone, radio waves. I had no idea my cell phone works on radio waves. Very detailed, sketchy illustrations of everything and how it works. And a little sidebar, mammoths. So David McCullough is such a curious guy. There are mammoths on every page, and they're doing things like hauling stuff up to build the pyramid. I love this book. But if there are budding engineers in your life, budding scientists, this is a good book for them. And I just want to put a plug in for going and talking to librarians and independent booksellers about what to buy.
That's very helpful.
This is only a few books, and there are so many out there. So,
Joy, what's next?
So leaping into the adult world, this is Emmett Rain by Patti Smith, who's probably most famous as a musician, but she's also a terrific writer. She did Just Kids, which got the National Book Award, and this is the book that she wrote after that, which is very different from Just Kids, but it has some of the same themes in it. This is basically almost like reading what I imagine her journals or diary would be. It just follows her in a bunch of different scenarios and locations in her life. It talks about her husband who passed away. It talks about her there's a lot of going to her favorite cafe in New York City where she went regularly, and at some point in the book the cafe closes, which is heartbreaking for her. There is a lot of coffee. This woman drinks a lot of coffee, and she writes about it beautifully. She has a very poetic, kind of lyrical way of writing words, the same way that her music has. And I would like to say, I haven't listened to this book, but I did listen to Just Kids, and I would imagine this is a great audiobook as well. Mm-hmm. So those make great gifts as well for people who are commuting or people who just don't like to read. She has a very soulful voice, even when just speaking. And you just feel like you really get to know her. And it also is one of those books that, because it jumps around location and sort of theme, you don't really need to read it straight through. So there's certain spots of it that spoke to me more because she was writing about a place that I'd been or about something that I knew about. So you can read it that way. And it's a great book for fans of her music, but also just for people who love New York City or people who love traveling and beautiful book.
Terrific. All right, Amy, what's next?
So cookbooks. Cookbooks are always good to give for presents. This is Smitten Kitchen Every Day. So Smitten Kitchen is also a blog that Deb Perelman writes. I was thrilled to find out that my grown kids love Deb Perelman. Perelman now still lives in the same tiny apartment in New York City. There's a theme going here. But she has 2 kids. So 2 kids and a husband. She is all about paring down her cooking to the essential. But it's really good. So can I just say the crispy fried egg on seared kale, the galette that tastes like that yummy artichoke dip, but is actually a very nice tart-like thing, you know, with like a quiche. Or the one bowl cake, which is splendid. And you make it in one bowl. So if you're thinking about a cookbook to liven up someone's life or just to explore new avenues, I really love Smitten Kitchen Every Day.
All right. What's next, Joy?
Okay, so next is one of those novels that's just a good novel to sink yourself into. You get really caught up in the story. This is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. And there are a lot of characters in this book, but they're all... I felt anyway that there was something to relate to in each of the characters. It's a story that takes place in suburban Cleveland, the perfect Shaker Heights, which is a planned community, and even to this day is, I think, pretty, straight-laced in a lot of ways. So this is basically a story about when outsiders move in, a single woman and her daughter, and the woman's an artist, so she kind of brings a different sensibility into, suburban Midwest, and has different connections with everybody in the family, the Richardson family, which is the mom of that family has been in Shaker Heights, their family, for generations. So it's a story about what happens to those characters, and also what happens when one of the sort of wealthy white people of privilege adopts a baby with an Asian mother, and sort of the ethics of that, and should they get to keep her, and so people take different sides on that depending on what their thought process is about it, and also depending on their age. There's a lot of teenage characters in this, so this is accessible, I think, and would probably be enjoyed by teenage readers as well as adults. And what I really love about it is that there are no stock characters. There is sort of the suburban mom, and there's the one teenager who's more rebellious, but nobody's a stereotype, and there's something redeemable about each of those characters. Even when you think they're doing something nasty, you sort of get the background and know why.
I'm going to cut you short. We have a lot of books to
All
still
right,
cover.
you have 3 more minutes to go.
Okay, so I can be quick. This is Ron Chernow, Grant. It's thick. It's great. So if you have a history buff in your life, and if you're curious about how a great guy who was unassuming, quiet, hardworking, led this country to Union victory in the Civil War, became the president, and then wrote a fabulous memoir. This is the book to read, slowly and carefully and enjoyably.
Excellent.
And a lot about the white supremacists of his time, who Grant fought very, very hard.
Okay, Joy, quickly, what do you have got
Okay,
next?
quickly, I can talk about it quickly because it has to do with coffee. It's a Vermont author, Julia Alvarez, and a beautiful book with woodcuts it's about coffee. It's about an American.
What about Caroline, though? The Laura Ingalls Wilder.
Oh, I skipped Caroline.
Quickly.
I did quickly. Caroline is the Little House Revisited. It's fan fiction for people who love the Little House book, told from the perspective of the mother. So Ma, yes. So Ma is pregnant, riding on the prairie and trying to make ends meet, and living with her crazy husband, who's really loving and wonderful, but keeps moving westward.
Excellent.
It's a hard life Caroline has.
So another great novel, A Gentleman in Moscow, my favorite book, impossible to get hold of, right? Always a reserve list. A count who is imprisoned in a beautiful hotel and has to figure out his life for the next 30 years. What a great life. You mentioned Eloise in Paris, Eloise in the hotel when we were talking about it. Eloise at the Ritz. A Gentleman in Moscow reminds me of that. Very classy.
And my pick was The 100-Year-Old Man Who Climbed Out the Window and Disappeared. It's a funny, quirky story. Thoroughly enchanting. I love the character, and if you have anybody in your family who's a senior citizen, who's living in a senior center, this will really strike a lot of chords with you. Now, for a complete list of all the books that we've reviewed today, you can write to the Vermont Department of Libraries at 109 State Street in Montpelier. The zip code is 05609. Be sure to include a return address, or you can also call at 802-828-3261 and ask for the Across the Fence book list. We'll also post the book list on the Across the Fence website. Thank you so much for bringing in those books.
Thank you.
That's our program for today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. And I'll see you again.